As we normally do at our press conferences, we'll take questions in groups of threes. When my colleague Rebecca brings the microphone to you, please identify yourself, tell us which news organization you're with, and if you can keep your questions relatively brief, that would be very helpful. First question, the woman here on the third row, followed by this gentleman here in the pink shirt, and then finally the woman here, Ashild. Thank you.
My name is Selena Rebane. I'm a deputy editor at Gas Strategies, which is a small news outlet. And my question is, does IEA have a view on stranded assets? Should there be a binding agreement from COP21? And if that is the case, then how will that impact the gas and coal and renewables balance up to 2040?
Thank you. I'm Damien Carrington from The Guardian. I wanted to ask about renewables, and I wondered whether you felt that renewables were at a tipping point at which they get a momentum of their own. You mentioned, the lowering in price. And then sort of related to that, in the past, the IEA has been criticised for underestimating how quickly renewables have grown. I wonder if, what steps you've taken to change the way you look at forecasting. Thanks.
And the last question, if you could just, yes, please.
Hi, Åse Lange from the Norwegian Business Daily. My first question is why you believe that the solar PV market in Europe might have peaked. Secondly, this more like the same as The Guardian, why the Energy Agency have undermined the increase in solar and wind power every year. And thirdly, if Fatih Birol still believes in a golden age for natural gas. Thank you.
So thank you. First of all, in terms of stranded assets, what we think is that if there is a 2 degrees world, 1/3 of the fossil fuel resources we have today will be stranded unless we see a major push of carbon capture and storage. Now, in order to carbon capture and storage to be profitable, you need a significant amount of carbon price, regulation, and the others. But this is what we see. Even in our central scenario, we think some parts of the fossil fuel resources will be stranded. But I would like to bring to attention one concept, and there are many colleagues here. They write a lot on these issues, which we follow with great interest. Not every fossil fuel is fossil fuel, but they are not the same thing. Namely, gas is different than coal, coal is different than oil. In a 2 degrees world, the biggest hit will come to coal with inefficient coal-fired power plants. Gas will be a different story. So therefore, to put the fossil fuels and lump them together, a group, may be easy to write, but it may not be the right way to put the things together. All the fossil fuels will suffer, definitely, but some will suffer more than the others. This is number one. Number two, CCS may change the picture if at all it becomes commercial, and if at all it gets a significant market share. The question about are the renewables coming to a tipping point? I think what you want to say is that are they competitive? Now, some of them, yes. For example, hydropower, in most cases, yes. The wind onshore, in a good site, yes. But offshore wind and solar may still need government support in order to compete with the traditional fuels. But the more we push the renewables, the more prices will go down, and then they will reach a competitive point earlier. This is number one. Number two, and this is, I think, as important as the first point, in many countries where renewables need to increase their market share, there are subsidies on fossil fuels. It is not a fair competition. Today, 500 billion US dollar of subsidies are put on the fossil fuels, which make the cost of fossil fuels artificially low. Therefore, whatever the cost reduction comes in the renewable energies will not be able to compete with fossil fuels, which are already cheap artificially as a result of government policies. If they are to be phased out, the life will be easier for fossil fuels. I will come to this renewable question in a moment, but let me address the golden age of gas, and I will come to the renewable story. Now, first of all, golden age of gas is not the name of the report we made. The name of the report was, I remember very well, because I put the name was, Are We Entering a Golden Age of Gas? Since it was a long name, people remember golden age of gas. No, but the answer, if I can answer this, our own question, answer is the following. In some part of the world, yes. In North America, we see a golden age of gas, a big penetration. But when you look at the implication of what is happening in Asia, which is the biggest part of the growth, it will be very difficult to talk about the golden age of gas because the biggest choice in East Asia is today coal, because it's cheaper. Unless we have a regulation for local pollution reasons or for climate change reasons, people will go for coal, which is the cheaper one. So we have a golden age of gas in North America, but the other parts of the world not yet there. For the PV in Europe, it is still increasing from 80 gigawatt to doubling, about 160 gigawatt, the solar capacity, and there is definitely room to increase further if the right policies are put in place. Coming back to the last question on renewables. First of all, 95% of our projections on renewables were on the dot, completely right. Hydropower and wind. With the solar, which is a 5%, and by the way, I should remind you, the share of solar today in the global energy mix, Damian asked the question, is not 10%, not 5%, not 1%, it is 0.1%. So we are talking about the 0.1% of the global energy mix. We, in our scenarios, what we are doing, Damian, is we look at as of the day we make the projections, what is the support of the government with that support? If the next year, if the support of the government increases, we increase our projections. We have another scenario that I suggest you to look, which is a climate-driven scenario, which the colleagues didn't look, this organization who make this analysis that you and the Norwegian colleague quoted. In that climate scenario, our solar numbers on the dot, completely right, because it has assumed a strong support from for the solar. So two different words. We make the projections. The day we make the projections, we say these are the policies. If the policies change, numbers do change as well. And this is the reason we change our numbers. And this is important. Our renewable numbers, I show you today, is very strong, and they may need to be revised next year which I hope so. For example, if from Paris we get a strong signal for a sustainable development investment pattern. So this is the relationship between the policy signal and the projections. We are happy to, again, next year, we come here to revise our projections for renewables and energy efficiency upwards if there is a policy signal. But we will not change the numbers because of the suggestions and here coming left and right, mainly if there is a strong, solid political support. Thank you.
We have a question down here from Amir, then from Javier, and the woman in the pinkish orange. Sorry.
Hi, Amir Paivar, BBC World Service. You said if the oil stays at 50, what happens in terms of the reliance going back to the levels of 1970s. But can you please elaborate for our viewers and listeners what that means for IEA? Do you feel nervous? Because any parallel with 1970s in oil brings some alarms.
Thank you so much. Javier Blas from Bloomberg News. 3 brief questions, if I may. The first one on Saudi Arabia. Is Saudi Arabia done in terms of expanding his capacity with the 12.5 million barrels a day of crude oil? I mean, I understand that probably they need to bring new projects for replacing declines, but are they basically done in terms of what they need to do? My second question is on non-OPEC. I mean, considering that on the short-term oil market outlook, you are already forecasting a drop next year or 500,000 barrels a day of non-OPEC. However, when you look by 2020 on the WIO, you are anticipating an increase. Where that oil is going to be coming from non-OPEC, and do you see the prices that you have on the new policy scenario enough to incentivize that? And my final question is on electricity that sometimes is overcome as a sector. We have here in the UK, as recently as last week, problems with, we didn't have a problem, but emergency measures had to be taken. How worried are you, particularly on OECD countries, with the level of investment that we are seeing in electricity? And do you think that we are lagging? Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Leach from the Guardian Global Development Professionals Network. I wanted to ask you about the energy outlook for Africa in terms of the energy mix and expanding access.
So these are 5 questions, 3 from Javier, as usual, so plus 2. So first of all, it's a very good question. What does it mean if the 3/4 of the global oil exports come from Middle East in the future? So, first of all, let me tell you the following. Middle East is and will remain the heart of global oil markets for many years to come, whatever happens to the rest of the world, because it is the lots of resources and it is cheap to produce. In the United States, we see a production growth, significant production growth, but almost all the production in the United States is consumed in the United States. US will never be a major oil exporter. The Asian demand growth can be met largely by one address, which is the Middle East. So, and many Middle East countries, for example, Saudi Arabia, has proven times and times to be a very responsible producer and being the central banker of the oil industry. Having said that, the concentration of production in a very few number of countries, and at the same time, the fact that Middle East is going through very difficult times today, what is happening in Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, this makes us rather worried in terms of the oil security. From IEA point of view, therefore, we believe that the oil security will be still the guiding principle of the IEA, together with pushing the low carbon technologies, efficiency measures, and others. We have to be ready if there is a problem, but currently we don't see a problem as it stands now. But if there was a problem, IEA is always ready to move. The point I wanted to make is that the concentration as a result of a $50 world for many years to come is not a good news for any region, but when it comes to Middle East, given the current situation in Middle East, it is an issue we wanted to underline. Now, Saudi Arabia, of course, like many other major key producers, are going through difficult times. I can tell you that in the last 5 years, the OPEC revenues were over $1 trillion annually. And according to our analysis in the VIO, World Energy Outlook, if the prices remain at these levels, it will go down to annually $550 billion, a big drop there. And this will have implications for the government budgets and for the investment projects. In our work, Saudi Arabia production will go to about 13.6 million barrels per day, about 13.6 million barrels per day, a slight increase compared to today, but I don't think that it will happen from one day to another, and it will not happen very quickly. I am sure countries in the region will look at the environment, the oil environment, and make their decisions accordingly. In the non-OPEC production, we expect that there will be about 2 million barrels per day of increase non-OPEC production, but this is in our central case where the oil prices increase significantly. So it will go from today's level in 2040 over 120, I guess, US dollar in 2040. If there's a gradual increase, we will see more non-OPEC oil to come, mainly from US, Brazil, Canada, Russia, and others. So now, electricity security. When you talk about IEA, people think of us as the oil security, but another area we put emphasis on the electricity security. And this will be more of a problem if we don't take the right measures, for two reasons. One, the infrastructure we have, transmission and distribution, especially in Europe and United States, is getting very, very old. Second, I mentioned the major penetration of renewables. This is a very good news for the climate change, but in order to address the issue of variability or nature of the renewables, we have to strengthen our electricity grids and networks. And therefore, there is a need for an investment for the electricity network in UK and the rest of the Europe. Africa. In Africa, first of all, we see two trends. One is that Africa is becoming a significant gas exporter sometime soon, coming to East Africa, especially Mozambique and Tanzania coming in the markets, together with the existing one, Nigeria and Angola, and especially Sub-Saharan Africa I'm talking about. But the main problem when we talk about Africa comes to my mind is the access to electricity. So today, 2 out of 3 people in Africa, they have no access to electricity. And there is a big push in many African countries to bring electricity to their people. And something may happen for the first time, and I am very excited about that. It is the following. When you look at the history of energy of Europe, US, China, their economic development in the last 80, 90 years was realized on the basis of using substantial amount of coal, okay, and cheaper LNG and coal. And they are, of course, as I said in the presentation, both US, Europe, and China now are reducing the share of coal. But in Africa, we may well see, for the first time, a region may realize its economic growth on the basis of using renewable energies. This means hydropower, solar, and wind, because there's a lot of push, plus the cost of those energies are also going down, and there is a lot of interest. So this is therefore an opportunity. This is not I don't say that this will happen, but there is a chance that this can happen, and Africa may well show a different dimension of realizing economic growth based on renewable energies, mainly, of course, using other sources as well.
Okay, we'll take some questions from the back, please. The woman in the second to last row here. Yes. And over there on, yes, ma'am with the glasses, and David as well.
Hi, I'm Amanda Cooper from Reuters. I had two questions. You mentioned your low oil price scenario as being rather unlikely. Can you give us and you say it will become increasingly unlikely over sort of a longer stretch of time. Can you give us what sort of percentage chance you attach to that happening as things stand right now? And secondly, you've said sort of in terms of production, the onus is very much on non-OPEC to moderate supply. Particularly, you've mentioned a 50 a barrel world will hurt high-cost producers in Canada, the US, Russia, Brazil, and so on. What is the tipping point for OPEC? Where might those producers be forced to moderate supply? At what kind of price level? And do you feel that they made a mistake last year by not cutting production?
Hi, David Strawn, freelance, writing about LNG at the moment. Fatih, you didn't really say very much about LNG, so I wonder if you could just tell us what you think the outlook is for the global trade. Also, you gave a rather, I think, kind of gloomy assessment for gas in Asia, and I wonder whether LNG within that is a different story. Perhaps there are exceptions, I don't know, but if you could flesh that out.
Hi, Megan Darby, Climate Home. I wanted to ask about the 2.7 degrees figure. I've seen that figure for the warming associated with INDCs. I've seen Climate Action Tracker produce that figure, and I wondered, and I've also seen other analysts produce a different figure. I wondered whether you had independently verified that number, or if you were sort of basing that on the Climate Action Tracker assessment, and also what could the energy sector do to accelerate that the transition to a world compatible with 2 degrees?
Shall I? Okay, thank you, Greg. So first of all, low oil prices. Is it how likely or unlikely it is? I mean, next year we can still see the prices at these levels, perhaps the year after, but what we are seeing is that level of price for a decade or beyond is unlikely. There may be zigzags, but to see that level of price is unlikely because of at least two reasons. One, the investments are declining in non-OPEC. They will continue to decline. Second, the many OPEC producers will lose substantial amount of revenues, which will make them look at their policies once again on the supply side. On the demand side, $50 oil price will give a boost to demand growth as well. If you look at just the numbers of last year, you will see that there's a strong increase of the sales of SUVs in the US markets and in other markets as a result of lower prices, which in turn will give a boost to oil demand in those countries. In terms of giving a percentage, I don't dare to give a percentage, but I would say that to have $50 of oil price for a decade and beyond is rather unlikely as we stand now. And for the OPEC producers, as I said, $50, In some cases, it may cover some of the costs, but important thing is most of those countries using oil revenues as the main revenue generator for their economies, and I believe those levels for a very long time will not be a good news for those countries, and they may again give a second look at their policies if the oil prices go substantially stay substantially low. Whether or not it was a mistake that they took this decision, it is up to them. But what we are seeing today is that the non-OPEC production is going to slow down, and in the US, a decline we expect next year about 400,000 barrels per day. So this may give you an idea the results of the policies put there. David asked the LNG trade. LNG in Asia will be stronger, in the world stronger. Currently, it is 50% of the global trade is made with LNG, 50% by pipelines, and this will change in favor of LNG in the future, and Asia will be the region where we see a lot of LNG moves. But, David, the issue is there are a lot of LNG projects now coming to an end from Australia, soon from United States. Africa will come through. Russia has some expectations. But in order to LNG to increase this market share, one should look at the competitiveness of LNG vis-à-vis coal, mainly, and also vis-à-vis renewables. On one hand, they are becoming cheaper. On the other hand, many countries are helping the renewable energy, supporting them. The LNG has to compete against the solar PV in India. So therefore, the terms of LNG will be definitely important, what kind of conditions coming there. Now, 2.7 degrees is our own number, and UNFCCC announcement on the INDC kindly used our finding, which was explicitly mentioned. And what can the energy sector do to go from 2.7 to 2 degrees? We suggest 4 things to COP. We will be very active in COP, and 4 things coming from energy sector. Because as I said, energy sector is responsible 2/3 of the emissions. Therefore, we feel responsible to make a positive contribution to the solution. What are those? First of all, we would like to see that the coverage of the mandatory energy efficiency policies need to be accelerated. Second, the support for renewable energies need to increase. Third, we would like to ask of banning the building of new inefficient coal-fired power plants. And fourth, we would like to see the reduction of methane emissions from oil and gas production, which is a very easy thing to do, technical point of view, but we don't have regulations worldwide set by the governments for the oil and gas companies. These are the 4 measures we are suggesting to COP, and in addition to our push since many years, elimination of fossil fuel subsidies. But what we also told the governments, and we are going to tell them in G20 in Antalya and during the COP meeting in Paris, that IEA is ready to help the UNFCCC and the governments to transform hopefully an agreement from Paris to action in terms of accelerating the innovation of clean energy technologies for renewable energies, energy efficiency, and other advanced technologies. 1. Second, we are also volunteered to monitor and publish the developments in different countries what is happening in their with their CO2 emissions vis-a-vis their pledges every year, to look at them, monitor them, track them, and publish the results and compare with their emissions. We'll be very happy to get such a mandate from the governments in Paris.
Thank you, Fatih. I think we have time for one final question, and I'd like to go in the very back, if there's somebody in the very back who has a question. No? Perhaps the gentleman here with the gray suit and the poppy. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, just a second. And you are? Please identify yourself.
Sure, I'm Henry Trex from The Economist. I'm just two questions, if I may. One of them regarding your forecast of $80 over the next 5 years. I mean, does this imply a kind of $80 break-even point for shale producers? Because you seem to sort of minimize slightly the possibility that as prices rise above 50, that shale producers will start producing again. Is that not going to happen until they hit 80? And a slightly longer term question, but in terms of this 2.7 degrees that you see from the INDCs, do you think that changes your assumption about peak demand for coal, oil, and natural gas? And could you give us a sense of how that might have varied as a result of those pledges? Thanks.
Thank you. So we think in order to see a production growth around 2020 from US shale oil, a price level around $60, $70 would be enough to see that production growth. But US shale oil is not the entire story. There are other parts of the equation, and looking at the demand, looking at the other non-OPEC producers, we think $80 will be a price which is a price which can balance out the market. Now, the second question is also a very good question. How does the INDCs, if at all, change the energy world? They do change the energy world, and it is the reason why I am trying to say since a couple of months there should be no energy company in the world. It can be oil, gas, electricity, renewables, whatever, who would believe that the climate policies will not affect their businesses. If any company believes that the climate policies are an issue of some of the NGOs or some think tanks and so on, they are making a grave mistake for their businesses. Forget the moral and all of these things for their businesses because of the, just for example, efficiency. And oil companies need to put more and more emphasis on the demand side, how much demand will grow. Because as a result of efficiency policies now on the cars, trucks, and they'll be stronger and stronger, demand will grow weaker than it was in the past. So what we will see is that as a result of INDCs or similar climate-related policies, globally, fossil fuel demand growth will slow down. This is important to note. However, I would caution us not to go to other extreme, that we do not need any more oil investment, we don't need any more gas investment. I wouldn't go that area as well. For example, in terms of oil, in the last 5 years, global oil investments each year annually were about $630 billion annually. When we look at the next 10 years, even the demand oil demand growth was zero, no demand growth. As a result of, I don't know, climate policies, this and that. The amount of money we need just to invest to increase the production to compensate the decline of the existing fields, we need also investments at the level of $650 billion. So more or less the same, what we had in the past, and what we in the future, because the declines are becoming steeper. So I have to ask all of us to be more pragmatic. We can, in the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we will still need to drive cars. We will still need to fly. Therefore, we need oil investments in order to compensate the decline and meet the growth of the oil demand, which is becoming weaker in the future as a result of efficiency policies. But this shouldn't, we should also note that there is a transition of energy system towards cleaner fuels, and energy system, global energy system, is becoming more and more efficient. But we will still need oil, gas, other fossil fuels for some time to come. And we talk about the world here, different countries, different regions give, of course, different pictures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fatih. And ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our press conference. Before you leave today, I'd just like to make two points to you. As Fatih mentioned, this weekend in Antalya, there is the G20 Leaders Summit. If you or your news organizations are attending, please note that Fatih will be doing a media briefing on Sunday at the International Media Center. The Turkish presidency can offer more details. We hopefully will be sending a media advisory shortly about that. The second thing is that next week in Paris, energy ministers and officials from around the world will be participating in the IEA ministerial meeting. This meeting will be chaired by U.S. Secretary of Energy Ernie Moniz. And next, on the 18th of November in Paris, a week from tomorrow, Fatih and Secretary Moniz will be doing a press briefing at the conclusion of the ministerial meeting. You have probably already received a media advisory from our offices. If you have not, please see me afterwards. Thank you very much. Have a good day.